Today, I want to talk about Tekken 2 in the hearts of men, the struggle for power between a father and son, an angel and devil, a kangaroo and dinosaur, and what a woman with the power to purify can do to you. For real though, Tekken 2 is probably my second favorite Tekken from an artistic standpoint. Released 9 months after Tekken 1, it's no exaggeration to say it shits on the original in every single way. Everything was much more sophisticated this time around, and I don't just mean the gameplay and graphics. This time there's a clear art direction, a deeper story, a more convincing motive for its characters, better designs for them too, and just straight up better music. This blend of visuals and aesthetics all came together to create this unique and dark atmosphere that we'll never really see again in the series. And the dated CG cutscenes and in-game graphics only help with that, I feel. Cause when I think of classic retro Tekken, this is the game I think about. Back when Heihachi literally had 2 cones sticking out his head. This is also when the series really established his identity. From a shittier but smooth looking Virtua Fighter clone, to a stylish and intuitive 3D fighter surrounding the infamous demonic bloodline and dysfunctional family that we've all grown familiar with. When Tekken 1 came out, it stood out for its eccentric characters for sure. But other than that, there wasn't anything too crazy going on. Maybe its use of textures. Then, 1995, they took the idea of an alternative costume you got from playing Galaga and made something quite interesting out of it. This was before the focus was set on the devil being genetic rather than a spiritual entity, and for the story this game was trying to tell, it actually worked better that way. But before I get into the details, I want to keep talking about the presentation, cause damn there's some things I find striking. Like the imagery they use of the devil and angel residing within Kazuya. You see it in the marketing, the opening cinematic, obviously the final boss of the arcade mode. You can call it demonic or occultish, either way that shit's gorgeous. With Devil, it's just something about his bloodshot eyes, that third eye that looks like a big ass red jewel stuck in his forehead, and the more traditional depiction of a devil with the hairy beast legs and the... Well, they probably didn't give him the tail yet because of technical limitations, but yeah. His new forms are sick, but I find the OG design to be more intimidating, and the blue skin goes harder than the purple. There's not much that needs to be said about Angel's design. It's pretty straightforward in what you imagine, although she too gives off a sense of royalty, with her laurel crown and the jewel tiara on her forehead. Then of course, we have the young power-hungry Kazuya kicking in his penthouse. Just peep the purple pimp suit. He's known how to dress from the start, but damn it hits a certain type of way, seeing that he's always been this evil after seeing him throughout all these years, even before he had a scar on like every single inch of his body. I love the contrast between his two sides, it's very elegant, and I can't overstate how much the primitive 3D just makes it look that much cooler. But that's only one of Tekken 2's aesthetics. In the way that Tekken 3 is undoubtedly late 90s with its iconic Big B soundtrack, sound effects that sound like this, and edgy emo protagonists, I like to think that Tekken 2 has that late 80s, early 90s feel to it. Maybe I'm tripping, maybe it's just cause Lei jumps out this window with a repeat cut like it's a Hong Kong action film, but the way each character is presented in the opening cinematic feels kinda reflective of that time. The intro song, Black Winter Night Sky, really sets the tone for it. The ambient instrumental, faint Swedish vocals, and the accompanying visuals just make it seem like the most ambitious blockbuster yet. If you haven't seen it for yourself, you really should. It's amazing. I won't get too into it since I've talked about it before, but I think Nina singing in the club flipping her noodle hair, which was actually very impressive for early 90s rendering hardware, as the beat switches to this keyboard melody, kind of embodies what I'm talking about. And like, how technology is portrayed here and here, you can't tell me this ain't some Terminator 2 shit. And before somebody points it out, I know Lee's ending has a blimp with 2012 on it, but dude, fuck off. Perhaps what really gives us a glimpse into this era are the numerous promotional renders that were created for the game. I actually wish Namco made more of these during this time, but even then the only other developer that could really compete with them when it came to these was Squaresoft. And this was the year that they were just dabbling into 3D. So yeah, you see the appeal. Some of these are rather mundane, but they are characteristic of each fighter. Like yeah, of course Gonryu likes his ramen, and Armor King throwing darts at a picture of Vanilla King is about the type of goofiness I expect from 2 grown-ass men running around growling in a jaguar mask. Can't believe both of these vatos are dead. Anna is posing like an auntie in this photo, and I ain't gonna lie, Bruce is rocking that crop top in his 80s fashion type shit. They got Kuma out here looking like a man-eater, but Michelle looks pretty in hers. I'm not sure who would be capable of getting off to this. So if you are, stay the fuck away from me. Looking back at this era of pre-rendered graphics, it kinda feels like a bridge between vagueness and detail, dreamlike in reality. You get my spiel. The group renders are a nice continuation of Tekken 1's. You can see how much they've improved in such little time. Hands down though, the best one is a key visual. The main one that looks like a movie poster, which was used for the PlayStation box art. And have I mentioned how fond I am of early CG? Cause this is peak aesthetic. Sometimes I can't help but just sit down and admire Heihachi's sexy bald ass head, majestically fading in from the nice and cloudy, bright blue sky. His daughter just doesn't compare. There's also an alternative visual with Kaz and the secret characters. It's cool, but I prefer the more vibrant and wondrous look of the original. I don't know about y'all, but my mood is directly affected by the weather. It's why June's stage is my favorite. It's probably the most serene one. And I know Yoshi's is literally called Serene Forest. You can see Stonehenge in the back, but nobody cares about that caveman shit. I just really like the detail in the backdrop with all these green hills, peaceful farms and villages scattered about as you overlook them from this tiny dirt road. I might sound like a madman looking this much into some 32-bit textures you have to squint like a motherfucker to even see without up-resing, but having weird hyperfixations like this can be pretty comforting. You should try it. What really makes this stage though, is the fact that it has my favorite composition from the entire game, and one of my favorites in all of video games, June's theme. It starts out slow, the intro is chill, with nothing but the sound of bongos and a bit of ambient noises. Then, the drums kick in, with these heavenly background vocals, which are very fitting for June's purity and the ability to cleanse evilness, or whatever it is she does. Not much after, we get to the main melody, with something that sounds like a flute coming in every now and then for variety, but the main focus still being a repetition of the same few notes, but I don't mind it, cause it's entrancing. Every fighter had their own stage like this, their own environment with music inspired by their personality or ambitions, along with unique colors and lighting to match it. Although they don't feel as catered as they would be in Tekken 3 and Tag 1, it still feels like we're stepping into their world, for the most part. I don't know what in the Planet of the Apes is going on with P. Jack's stage, but seeing what they eat for breakfast, I wouldn't even mind if London was in ruins for real. Michelle's stage is great. Her theme perfectly evokes what it feels like to be as free as a bird in the Arizona wilderness, free from noise pollution and having to pay taxes and shit. The warm sun-soaked tone of the Sonoran desert contrasts nicely with the color palettes of her remaining secondary outfits. I showed this game to my homie, and he had the audacity to say that I was ugly. Some people just don't get it, bro. This looks like I could hang it on my wall. Paul's stage takes place in a much more inhabited area of America, about as outgoing as you expect for a man like him. Sure, the old New York skyline with the World Trade Center is pretty nice to look at, but the highlight of this stage is definitely his jazzy arranged tune. That shit slaps, and I think it's befitting of this time period of New York. King's stage is a bit more solemn, taking place in the church I like to believe is the same one we saw in Tekken 1's intro. You gotta remember, King is a man of God, and he found himself on the bottle roaming through alleyways after a child at the orphanage had unfortunately died under his care. He was probably in here begging for forgiveness or something before he pulled up to throw hands. I often forget that King used to be a pretty serious character back then, in spite of him being a, well, you know. I think this would be a good time to bring up Armor King's stage. The stage is okay, I'm just not sure what the hell warrants this eerie, ominous, creepypasta-ass music. The way it just keeps repeating and repeating exactly what you're hearing makes you feel like something is about to happen, but will still never come. It kind of feels like blue balling. No wait, the word suspense, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies, bro. Yoshimitsu's is one I've heard people describe as liminal, and for good reason. The humongous trees engulfing everything under it in shadows, except for the opening in the treetops which illuminates the space you fight in, makes for a pretty calm and mellow setting. Lei's stage takes place in the dark of the night, on the Hong Kong rooftop. I imagine this is somewhere he'd be chasing down the suspect, dramatically jumping across buildings and such. All I really want to say is, I like the lighting effects they got around the helipad, and I bet the evening breeze feels amazing up here. Now Jag 2's theme, pure dog shit. How can you even call this music when it sounds like pots clanging? Is what I thought at first. Once the hit, then I started fucking with the vision. Funkiest of them all is Nina's. Nothing witty for this one. Just listen. I understand, stages are much more graphically complex nowadays. You can't accommodate every single fighter with one, so that's why we don't get character themes either, but at least the newcomers still do. I really did enjoy Victor's, Azucena's, and Reina's in Tekken 8. Most of the songs you've heard me play are the arranged console versions, and while the arcade OST is still worth a listen for the more snappy and raw approach, these ones just feel more complete, just more elevated. Like the character select theme, Are You Ready? It goes stupid hard, and I feel like too many people don't even realize it. You've listened to it right, but have you really listened to it? I mean, the timer is set to 20 seconds without hacks, so most people will probably have never even heard the best part of the song. The first thing you notice is this funky, menacing ass bass line, and it's unlike anything else on the soundtrack. It's accompanied by these synths that kinda sound like the second half of the PS1 startup. It goes on like this for a while, until we get to a DJ scratch and the synths start swirling around like they're going up and down or something. I don't know musical terms. And I don't know who is on the keys, but that man is going dummy in the studio. They must have been doing the boogie woogie up in that bitch, cause this almost sounds like something you'd hear in the club back in the day. Then we get this little breakdown that sounds reminiscent of an old school arcade game. Almost like it's celebrating Namco's foray from the classic 2D sprites of the arcades to the 3D capabilities and superior sound chip of the PlayStation 1. And then, we're back to the beginning, just with a few of those added layers. Between this, Ace Combat, and Ridge Racer, Namco's sound team were putting out nothing but bangers. So was Tekken 1, Street Fighter 1, and Mortal Kombat 1992 all have in common? They've all aged terribly and are made irrelevant by their sequels. It's not like Guilty Gear or Puyo Puyo where that shit went hard off rip. You see, with Tekken 2, they added a punch-out mode.
1, 2.
And the ground game was further refined and expanded upon. You could roll now, and instead of waiting 100 years to get up off your ass, you only had to wait 50. It's honestly the one thing that holds me back from recommending this game to anyone today. I've gotten used to it, so I don't really mind it no more, but you can imagine how having to wait a few seconds before you act, every single time you get knocked down, can kill the pacing of a match. Every character gets a guaranteed follow-up to their combo once the opponent hits the ground, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to lay there and watch that old bastard Wang complete his touch of death on you. Speaking of Wang, I feel like he was low-key slept on in this game, mostly due to his ridiculous damage and godlike throw, the waning moon. All throws in this game are unbreakable, so as soon as he's in range to put his old wrinkly hands on you, boom, insert another quarter. This reign would be short-lived though, as this move was stolen by Ogre and put to even better use in T3 and Tag 1. Xiaoyu inherited a heavily nerfed version of it in 8, if the grab animation looks any familiar to you. But believe it or not, this still wasn't the most brain-dead thing to come out of this game.
Yo! What it is, motherfucker?
Oh shit, here comes Pac-Man.
I'm not sure whose crack pipe Namco was hitting back in the early 90s to let this slip past quality assurance twice, but they actually forgot to fix King's Downfall 1 in the first arcade release of Tekken 2. It was the same as it was in Tekken 1, a whopping plus 93 on block, which meant you would get a guaranteed launch. A move you would rather it be blocked than it land is some interesting game design, but this was pretty out there. The flow chart went like, A, if it's blocked, get your combo, or B, if it hits, use that frame advantage to then throw out another one, and repeat. Obviously the Namcops didn't like this, so they shut it down real quick with version B of the arcade release. Speaking of King, let me show you something cool real quick. It's a secret throw that will never be passed down to King Jr., called the Octopus Stretch. It was an extension from his counter hit stagger kicks, where he puts the opponent in a deadly submission and instantly kills them, thus being the single most damaging throw in Tekken history. And tell me this doesn't look like the coolest shit ever. Every character in this game had at least a few hidden moves like this that you couldn't find on the move list. Definitely part of the charm of this era of gaming. And in Beck's case, it was an entire stance with the iconic flamingo, the same one that will go on to define his pupil Huarong in later entries. You know what, I'm getting a bit too ahead of myself. I should have probably told you that universal sidestepping wasn't a thing yet. That was Tekken 3. Some specific moves had built-in sidestep for evasion, but the only character who could manually sidestep was Kazuya, although it was accessed from his mess step. So like, technically, but not really. Crouch dashes couldn't be cancelled either, so wave dashing didn't exist yet, aka the most satisfying movement technique in a fighting game ever. The iconic electric variant of the Wind God Fist wasn't introduced yet either. And you see where I'm getting at with this? When I said this was when the series found its identity, I more so meant thematically than mechanically. It's a step forward in terms of fluidity, expanding move lists, and introducing some fundamental mechanics. But it wouldn't be until Tekken 3 when we really saw any resemblance of the gameplay we see today. And Tekken 5 is pretty much where you can be like, oh yeah, that definitely looks and feels like Tekken. I'm sure it existed, even if it hadn't taken off yet, but I can barely find anything online that mentions an actual competitive scene surrounding this game, which isn't too surprising. Although I do know that Ryan Hart was a king main, so he was probably out terrorizing local English pubs. If you still want a tier list, I'm gonna go on a whim and say it probably looks something like this. It is a bit half-assed, but I mean, who's gonna tell me I'm wrong? Kazuya is in his own category. Misstep, twin pistons guaranteed after a single jab and wall rising too. TLDR, the frame data is just stupid. If you lose with Kazuya in this game, then you're fucking trash. Like, you should feel really bad about yourself. Side note, by this game he pretty much had all the iconic and fundamental Mishima tools that are integral to his gameplay today, and I think it's fascinating how it hasn't changed much since then. Devil and Angel are just Tekken 1 Kazuya with lasers. Bruce was a bully, his streams were genuinely bullshit, lots of damage, gelling, safe, guaranteed on counter hit, mixed up on block, and his chain grabs. Prototype Jack was actually not that bad. He even had an infinite. Moving on, Harada was not the director of the series yet. He wouldn't gain that role until Tekken 3. During this time, he was busy being one of Namco's best promoters, the voice actor for Yoshi and Law, and he also drew this nice promo art for an arcade store. The title of Tekken 2's director and lead designer belonged to Seiichi Ishii. Now if you're a fan of 3D fighting games and you don't know who this man is, well actually I'm not gonna go on a tangent. Just know that he was the designer for the massively influential Virtua Fighter, and then went on to be the director and lead designer of Tekken 1 and 2. Kinda like how SNK got Street Fighter's director and designer to create Fatal Fury. Oh, and also Toba and Ergites at his company Dream Factory. Shout out to Ergites. We won't talk about the bouncer though. The fact that this game has those Virtua Fighter moon jumps could be taken as a clear sign of his involvement. Now I hate to be that guy, but I'm not letting Virtua Fighter go just yet. The gaming industry, especially during the 90s, was all about competition. Tekken was created to compete with Virtua Fighter. It was turned from a tech demo into a fighting game for that sole purpose, so I feel it's appropriate to draw comparisons. No disrespect, but Virtua Fighter character design at this point was a bit reserved. Well actually not all of them, but in contrast to Tekken, which had no problem leaning into bizarre and supernatural from the jump. No matter how many bitter old heads complain about anime bullshit, as if that first started with Lars and Elisa. Just look at the top of Paul's head. He looks like that one fool from JoJo's. Jackie is one wavy ass white boy, but that's a fucking bear, and a rugged, scarred, electric infused karate man who can morph into the devil, and a robot, and a kangaroo, and a dinosaur, and a Mexican. The strangest of them all is probably Yoshimitsu. I mean really, how weird is this guy? This was the last game we saw his skin. As the series went on, he started to appear less and less human, and more akin to an alien or a cyborg. Maybe that bloodthirsty demon sword of his is gradually stripping him of his humanity. Or did he have some heavy modifications done to his body? Fun fact, his design is heavily inspired by the samurai ghost of Taira no Kagekyo from the old Namco side-scrolling hack and slash, Genpei Tomaden. But that's old as fuck though. Maybe you might recognize him from the non-code dating simulator from back in the day. The one where you can ship yourself with the Galaga ship. Pac-Man is the high school's principal. And King is the teacher who communicates exclusively through the chalkboard. And hold up. Let me get back on track. Tekken 2 is when Yoshi first obtained his spinning mechanical hand. And I'm not sure if this was written in to justify this one move's existence, or if it came after, but I love when connections are made between story and gameplay like this. Supposedly, Yoshimitsu's sword arm was severed during a botched raid on the Mishima Labs, where he sought to steal the secrets for a perpetual engine that was under development. The same man who developed that technology, Dr. Boskanovich, would then use it to create Yoshimitsu's replacement hand, even though he tried to jack his shit. I mean jack his papers, not jack... whatever. The Russian doctor would later be kidnapped by Kazuya, and was forced to work under him, with tasks like the creation of bioweapons Roger and Alex, the repairment of the first Jack unit, and the development of brand new ones. Despite this, Kazuya still sentenced him to an execution, cause he couldn't wait like 5 more years I guess. This is why Yoshi enters the second King of Iron Fist tournament, in order to rescue him and repay the favor. And this is why we see him bust him out of a helicopter during his ending. Isn't that interesting? We never even get to see any of that during the game. This was all taken from the PAL manual and the Japanese website. Tekken 2 is full of hidden lore like this, that was only alluded to in some endings. There's just so much more going on during the events of this game than one would expect. Like when I first read that Lee became Wang's pupil on the Tekken wiki. When I first read that, I was like, oh, that's bullshit. Why would Lee team up with Wang in such a specific manner? This is probably just someone peddling their fanfic again. But no, it was actually in his official profile from the website, and is even referenced 14 years later in Tekken 6's scenario campaign. They formed this alliance because they both had business to settle with the Mishimas. Wang was homies with Heihachi's father, who before quote unquote dying, told Wang, in order to bring about peace, the Mishima clan must be destroyed. It took a few years for the gears in Wang's head to start spinning, and probably for him to witness Kazuya's corruption and control the Zaibatsu to fully realize what his old friend really meant, cause clearly those words weren't blunt enough. Now Lee, he was an orphan from the streets of China who was adopted by Heihachi purely to spite Kazuya and become his rival. They were both raised together under the same hard conditions, but they didn't bond over it. Kazuya is way too much of a hater for that. Fast forward to post Tekken 1, and upon Heihachi's defeat, Kazuya offers his beloved brother the high and mighty position of being his personal secretary, obviously done to belittle him. And this is probably around when Wang hops out the bushes and explains his grandiose plan. By the way, tell me this isn't like the douchiest win pose ever. This was before his cool, flamboyant, and funny personality was introduced, which I'm a fan of.
Excellent.
Back then, his entire characterization was stepchild who was treated like absolute shit by both Heihachi and Kazuya, and was always out to prove himself. In the Tekken movie, they even got him airing out the room and self-destructing the entire island, along with himself, just to get back at them.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Lame. That's not how you go out with style. That's just petty. But back to Lee and Wang. It's not like they retroactively added this stuff in to enrich the universe. It's been there from the start. We just couldn't see it. If you're from America, the manual will just tell us dumb shit like Nina watching Tom and Jerry. Well, I guess it does make her relatable. Kazuya in Tekken 1 was actually a lot like me. He was unemployed, and his only job was being a burden to his father. Other sideline stories include Bruce becoming a wanted man for refusing to throw a match in which he killed his opponent, fleeing on a plane where he's then confronted by both his hired killer and the Hong Kong detective. They all brawl, chaos ensues, the plane crashes, Bruce has amnesia and is the only survivor. Kazuya finds and recruits him, and that detective was actually Lei's partner, so that's why he gets involved. There's also Jack 2 gaining consciousness when he encounters a little girl named Jane on the battlefield, who later becomes a recurring character and creator of future Jack models. He chose to desert and seek help from his creator, hoping to find a way to become more human, but is unfortunately found and struck down by Dr. Abel and his huge ass satellite. Then there's Michelle. Her mother was kidnapped by Kazuya to lure her into the tournament. Why? cause she's in possession of a mysterious amulet that Kazuya claims to know the secret of. It's actually an artifact that was searched for by her father under Heihachi's orders, but he was then assassinated when he failed to report back. The secret being one that directly ties into the events of Tekken 3. Backstory is a tearjerker. We'd be here all day if I went into detail for all of these backstories, and I'm already sick of all my videos being like half an hour long. So instead, I'll focus on the main characters and plot for the remainder of this video. Starting with June grew up surrounded by the nature of Yakushima Island, under the Kazama clan, where she developed spiritual abilities and was taught Kazama-style martial arts. As an adult, she moved to Tokyo to work for an environmental protection group, but dwelling in the city for so long dwindled her ability to commune with Mother Nature. Her faith wouldn't be reignited until one night, when she was visited by her late father's spirit, some type of astral projection shit that Kazuma just seemed to be capable of doing. Around this time is when she learns of a powerful man named Kazuya Mishima, who's been involved in illegal animal smuggling and experimentation. She enters the tournament to put an end to it, but also senses a mystic force surrounding Kazuya. Wanting to free him of this possession, she fucks him, I guess. Kazuya let his guard down because he felt oddly drawn towards this mysterious woman. She approached him without any fear in her heart, unlike anyone else. But shit, can you blame him? Who wouldn't have folded? Now Kazuya falling for a tree-hugging hippie isn't all that surprising, to be honest. Good girl and bad boy, it's a tale as old as time. Not to be freaky or anything. In the first game, Kazuya wasn't your typical honorable, fine game karate gi wearing MC driven by hopes and dreams. Instead, he was fueled by hate and revenge, and he wanted to kill his father. Not a very noble goal, but if my dad chucked me off a cliff when I was 5 years old, I'd probably be on the same shit. So depending on where your morals lay, you could have found yourself ruined for him, but only briefly did the game touch upon the fact that he actually wanted Heihachi's power all to himself. And that's what's interesting about this game, the protagonist switch. Now we're rooting for the lesser of two evils, cause somehow the man who yeeted his 5-year-old child off a cliff is actually a less terrible person than said child. Drug trafficking, kidnapping, extortion, assassinations, all on a global scale. Just look at him, walking around like he's a shit, like he's untouchable. Y'all might not understand what he's going through, but this is exactly what I felt like when I first purchased an air fryer, so I feel for him. But why, when faced with the opportunity to right his father's wrongs, did Kazuya decide to be just as big of a piece of shit? I'm sitting on my armchair for this one, but the want for revenge is inherently human. It isn't necessarily evil. Could it have been the devil? Spoilers for Tekken 8, if you care. But Kazuya admitted that the devil gene was only a means to an end, and his nature was always like this. Was that the case when they wrote this game? I don't think so. There's so much emphasis on the devil's influence, and the need for figures like June and Angel in his life. I believe Angel was retconned. She's never canonically mentioned again, and it's hard to fit her in the story in a way that makes sense anymore, since they changed the devil gene to be what it is now. Heihachi Mishima. I already know Kazuya had his tail between his legs when, well, they tell they will give him later. I already know Kazuya was ready to shit his pants when he first heard Heihachi was still alive. Nowadays, it probably don't even faze him anymore. Heihachi climbed back up the cliff he was tossed off and fled into the mountains to train in secret with his best friend, Kuma 1. Not Junior, Kuma Senior. Waiting, preparing for the right time to strike back. In the end, Kazuya was overpowered by the determined Heihachi. He even transformed into the devil, but he still somehow got his ass kicked. Supposedly, he was in a weakened state from his encounter with June, which weakened the presence of devil. But I blame it on the lack of stamina from that night. Keeping up with family tradition, Heihachi tosses his son off a cliff, but this time he spices things up with a volcano. Surely he can't come back from this, right? Wondering what could have been, Jun returns to Yakushima to raise a son that Kazuya left her with. She ends up encountering Devil, who wants to claim the baby's soul, but as long as she's around to ward it off, then things should be alright. As for Heihachi, I was gonna say I miss Heihachi, but he's already back. They didn't have the balls to let him sit out even a single installment. I think it's a bit lame, cause even in his absence, his influence was felt throughout Tekken 8, and I thought that was pretty nice. It also undermines Tekken 7, but I understand the genre, and I know gameplay comes first, and he was pretty fun, so. As much as I feel like Tekken 2 was special for its themes and storytelling, and how it set the stage for the rest of the series, its impact is still nothing compared to its legendary sequel that'll take over the world by storm. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Peace.